Extra deck mechanics. I do not know of a single trading card game that does not include them in some way, shape, or form, but that being said, I've only played like 3 trading card games outside of the one that I made. It is very cold outside, so I'm gonna be wearing this. For those of you who aren't aware, Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is the main game that I am familiar with, uses a main deck of cards which you draw from over the course of a given duel. It is where your main strategy is usually housed, and it is the backbone of your deck, but you also have something called an extra deck. Now, this is a smaller, more concentrated and consistent group of cards that isn't drawn at random, but instead can be called on by the player at any point in the duel, as long as they've met the conditions to summon said card. Now, I've already said it, but in my opinion, the biggest draw to having an extra deck is, well, not having to draw cards at random. You have these big powerhouse cards that you can consistently get out onto the field without having to worry about whether or not you hard draw them from the main deck. You just have to do the setup to meet their summoning conditions and boom, you've got them. You don't have to get lucky to summon these cards, and it makes certain strategies more consistent. It also raises the value of certain cards that just set the board up for you to do something with, because having good follow-up immediately improves the benefits of good setup. When you have to hard draw your monsters from a main deck just to get them onto the field, well, that inherently lowers the power of your deck and makes them feel worse to play. Ritual monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! For the most part are considered to be bad for that very reason. There's too many moving pieces and too much luck involved getting the things that you need in place for them to hit the field. You can add searchers to your deck to try and grab the specific pieces that you need with a bit more consistency, but that is more of a band-aid to the problem. It doesn't outright solve it, it just mitigates it. The extra deck is the true solution to the setup problem, because if the follow-up to your setup is guaranteed, well, boom, now you're moving. The setup just got a lot more reasonable to attempt. It also just feels a lot better to know that you're going to be able to play the game in the way that you want to play it. Now, in my game, consistency isn't really an issue because you get to choose the cards that are in your starting hand: 5 avatars, monsters, and 5 runes, magic cards. So with that in mind, let's say that there's a boss monster or a linchpin of a deck that you really need to summon. Well, you can just include it in your opening hand. There's no real difficulty in shuffling the cards around or anything like that. So what is the need to add an extra deck if consistency isn't a problem that we need to solve? Well, after giving it some thought, I have a few reasons as to why an extra deck would be beneficial for my game, but I've also come to the conclusion that it isn't absolutely necessary. In my mind, I don't know that I need an extra deck for the same reasons that other games do, and so when the game releases, the vault won't be a feature. You will just draw cards from your resource deck and the vault will be added later on. That being said, the vault, i.e. the extra deck if you didn't clock onto that, will be added later on. You see, canonically speaking, the fantasy series that this game is based on has a feature wherein summoners can increase the power of the avatars that they have conjured through a means called Ascension, where they rank up into a higher, more powerful form. Very standard for a series of this nature in this genre. So if I wanted to reflect that in the game, it seemed to me like the easiest method would be to include an extra deck to house these ascended avatars and allow the player to bring them out after meeting the conditions to ascend in real time during the game. There's more to it though. You see, from a game design perspective, I would like to introduce more powerful effects as the game continues to go on, but as I've already said, you choose the cards that go into your starting hand, which means adding in very powerful effects willy-nilly could very easily just break my game in half. Having the option to lock more powerful effects behind a summoning condition that the players have to earn the right to use just sounds like an inherently good way to try and maintain game balance. There's also just the fact that adding new mechanics to a game can be a fun way to increase variety and increase the skill required to play without being too foreign or just having to create a new game from the ground up. More skill will be required during a game to anticipate when your opponent will use their extra deck, and before a game even begins when you are building your own deck to try and prepare for and counter your opponent's strategies. I also just prefer this as a method of introducing variety into the game over just adding in new cards, for example, because, well, new cards can only benefit certain decks, whereas this benefits everything in the game as a whole. It's just you can't do it as often. The game does become a bit more complex and harder to digest as a result, but that's why I've limited myself to 3 core mechanics that will come out over the space of, I want to say, 3 to 4, maybe 5 years during the game's lifespan. Those being Ascension, Combination, and Contract Summoning. Details about them will obviously be shared later, but for now the names sort of speak for themselves. So that is everything for now. If what I've talked about in this video sounds interesting to you, then consider trying the game out. Join our Discord community, find out how to play, subscribe to the channel for updates on the game as development continues, and leave a like to share it to more people so you've got more people to play against. With that being said, have a wonderful day and take care. Bye.